For a second lesson, the words of Paul in his letter to the Christian community in Rome. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the will of God for you, what is good and acceptable and perfect. For as in one body we have many members, and not all the members have the same function, so we who are many are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. Let us bow for a moment. In the silence, in this time apart, O God, grant us moments of reflection and renewal that shall strengthen us for life, joyful and free. In the Spirit of Jesus, Amen. There's a university professor out in Salt Lake City who is convinced that there is a lot of loneliness out there in our world today, to a greater extent perhaps than in past eras. And in order to confirm that thesis, at Christmas time he took telephone books from Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh and proceeded to send out some 600 Christmas cards at random to people he did not know. He included his return address on the cards. How many do you think took the trouble to respond? 117. And their comments were both humorous and poignant. One wrote, "It was really great hearing from you again. I'll be in Salt Lake City this summer, and if you have a spare room, we'd like to spend a few days." Of course, that wasn't exactly the kind of response he had in mind. Another wrote, "Marge and I are divorced, but how wonderful it was for you to write and remember us." Another said, "We had difficulty remembering at first who you are, but after some thought we did. Please give our love to your father. He's such a wonderful man." And still another replied, "I just got out of the hospital, and how good it was to hear from an old friend like you." I think there is a lot of isolation in our time. I don't mean absence of other bodies particularly, or faces. I mean distance felt even when the elbow is close. I mean the feeling that there are very few upon whom we can really lean or depend. Our culture seems almost designed to thwart strong, close networks of relationships, intense and ongoing friendships. The pace and mobility kind of turn the daily scene into a blur of faces. We are seldom with one another very long. The workplace is divorced from the places of family and party and play. The distractions of entertainment divert us from serious encounter and engagement. You probably read the recent study which suggests the average father can spend about a minute of quality time with his children on any given day. I see loneliness written large on the faces of young people who march down the street to the hordes at high school. I mark it on the eyes of an occasional college student who enters our doors here. It dogs the hours of many mothers, surrounded indeed by little ones, while the spouse is off across the country. It's there in the masses, in the loop, hurrying to lunch and back again, in the high-rise honeycombs, in the hospitals where mind or body have broken down. A poet sitting in a bar in Manhattan penned this on a napkin. Faces along the bar cling to their average day. The lights must never go out. The music must always play, lest we should see where we are. Lost in a haunted wood, children afraid of the night, who've never been happy or good. I suppose a certain amount of loneliness is part of life, but we can't go it all alone. Not even the Lone Ranger could. Life without real relationships of quality and continuity is no life at all. We cannot get along without one another. That's hard to face. It's a scary thought. It means we're much more dependent than we like to admit. But life alone is a simple impossibility. The Greeks had a word for it. You know what it was? Idiot. The word originally in the Greek means one who dwells alone. I resonate to the words of the late Carlisle Marney down in Augusta, Georgia. What if your prime gift in life is a set of relations with others, brothers, sisters, and there is no thing you must be? What if life really is a personal affair with people and children and family? What if a life lived with others is my only worth? What if? But how do we find our way to each other, and what do we really need from each other? Is the crowd enough? The gang, the club, the Saturday night party, bumping elbows over cocktails, or jumping up and down in Soldiers Field? Is that enough? Are the casual or guarded smiles of the office, or the golf foursome when the weather is good? I don't make light of any of these. They're innocent and important, but we really need more from each other than just these if we're to survive healthy and happy, if we are to be saved. What we need is a real sense of community. Buzzword today, isn't it? So we better be clear about what we mean. Martin Peretz writes, the word community as commonly used means almost nothing anymore. The financial community, for example. Wall Streeters, he suggests, are more like a cohort of cutthroats than they are a community. Another blithe romantic falsehood is the intelligence community. It may be intelligent, but it's not community. And I don't think America has anything properly called a Jewish community or an Hispanic community. And how about that community of nations? So what do we mean by real community? I've always loved the story of Paul and Silas in Philippi. It's great fun to take the young people there and show them the ruins of the old city and the jail. They were prisoners of the Roman authorities for offending the crowds of that imperial city. And what do? Chained to the dungeon walls in the middle of the night? Why, they do what any good community of faith does. They hold choir practice. Until one of the earthquakes common in that region freed them from their chains, and they sat there wondering what to do next. The jailer, paralyzed with fear that they might escape and cost him his life, asks them, "What must I do to be saved?" And that was not a theological question. He meant, how am I going to escape with my life out of this mess? And they respond rather unusually, believe in the love of Jesus, trust him and his God, and you'll be all right. And the jailer and his family, there in the middle of the night, discover a new kind of community, a real human community. Because what did it mean to believe in Jesus? It wasn't an individual transaction between the solitary soul and some strange God. It meant welcome into a community governed by his spirit and life. So it meant, first of all, a community of unqualified acceptance and embrace and affirmation across cultural and political and racial lines that divided them. A new kind of community that night was born on the European continent. A couple of Jewish strangers come to share life with a family of a Greek jailer employed by Imperial Rome. Across all their differences, they discover that they are one together as part of the family of God. And surely we need something like this desperately in our time, whether in neighborhood or between nations. All the rest of the communities I know anything about are built up around restriction, barrier. In school, your sense of worth is very much tied to your performance, as it is on the job, is it not? I heard about 6-year-old Angie who came home from school with a gold star that she won in her natural history class. I said a giraffe had 3 legs and they gave me a gold star. Her mother responded, but a giraffe has 4 legs. And Angie shot back, yeah, I know, but I was closest. The rest of the communities of our lives, you have to be able to play golf or know the right friends or be Irish or love opera or have lived here 50 years. Nothing wrong with anything, with any of this, but it isn't quite the community that this world needs. We need community where we can be accepted and embraced as human beings with all our strengths and weaknesses, beauty and warts, gifts and liabilities, in the confidence that we belong. Really sounds like what we want from marriage and family, isn't it? It's what the young couple who stood here yesterday are really hoping for from one another. You remember Robert Frost's old definition, family is where when you go there, they have to take you in. But family's not doing it. Every politician running is bemoaning the breakdown of the family, most of the evils of our society. Street crime, drug abuse, neglected children is laid at the door of the crumbling family. But family has never been able to do it on its own, afford the constancy and intimacy and embrace that we all need to function and thrive. Real families of acceptance and affirmation are the creation of and are sustained by their relationship to that larger family, the family of God. A community of faith born of the love of God for each one of us. Minnie Pearl, the Grand Ole Opry trooper, used to speak about her childhood down in the Tennessee mountains. And she vividly recalls the night her father got caught in a storm and didn't make it home. He could see the thunderheads rolling across the sky. He was out on his horse far from home, and so he went to the first farmhouse that he saw and asked if he could have shelter. And the people who lived there took the stranger's horse to the barn and then invited him to share their table. And no sooner had Minnie Pearl's father stepped inside than the heavens broke in a terrible storm. They sat down to the meal, and they sat in an awkward silence for some time. And then finally the woman of the house spoke in an effort to make the stranger feel welcome. She looked out the window and said, "Sure is raining hard outside." And then her husband, in his only word during the entire meal, said, "Let it rain, everybody's in." And Minnie says that that simple word remained indelibly imprinted on her mind as a picture of the way it is with God's family. Everybody's welcome, everybody's in. In faith in Jesus, they discovered a community of acceptance, a human community. And then they also discovered a community of accountability, because faith in Jesus meant the willingness to place their lives under His direction among His people. There's a kind of naivety about a lot of modern individualism which assumes that we can manage to live lives of decency and character without the influence and challenge and expectations of others in real community. Or that we can associate with almost any crowd and yet keep our character solid and purposeful. But this is to defy everything we know about human nature. It is only as we bind ourselves to one another in covenant under a common Lord and leader that we stand any chance of leading healthy, moral, and productive lives. If there's been a breakdown of moral values in our time, it is rooted in the breakdown of communities of accountability, all the way from family to church. And to turn to the schools and the state to do something about it is quite frankly futile. No less a liberal than Daniel Moynihan has written, "What is it that government cannot provide? It cannot provide values to people who have none or who have lost those they had. It cannot give meaning to life. In particular, government cannot cope with the crisis in values which is sweeping the Western world." If government cannot, then who can? Only you and I can, in communities that we nurture of accountability to one another and to our God. Mark Jacobson is a novelist and essayist, columnist out in Manhattan. Says about his 4-year-old daughter, May said to me one day, "God doesn't exist and it's dumb to think so." "Who told you that?" "No one, I just think it." Mark went to his wife and said, "We're talking about our daughter's spiritual life here. Who does she think she is with this no God stuff? Some 5-year-old Albert Camus?" Subsequently, he says, he became obsessed with May's religious training, or rather lack of it to that point in time. So that's why he works at it now. That's why with increasing urgency, I'm turning to the religious community. For if a value system is going to be involuntarily absorbed by a kid of mine, I'd rather have it be a 2,500-year-old system, the product of constant working and reworking of the most creative minds, than a tinny narrative worked up during a 20-minute meeting in a sleek-lined NBC story conference room. Beyond that, I'm beginning to get the crazy thought that it might be possible for one of my children to have a special talent for knowing God. It's something parents just should do. But what a weird way to return to the fold. Oh, there's another couple who wrote this, and I find it very interesting. We decided to start back to church to see if there might be something there for us. We felt a need. We went with eyes open, a little skeptical. We even shopped around until we found a congenial and friendly congregation and a minister we could stand to listen to. But it's been our salvation. We're back on steady ground again, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. We simply injected a little Christian order and common sense into our hitherto chaotically free lives. We have discovered people who think thoughts, read books, and who, like us, had gone on a veritable binge of personal liberty only to find that it boomeranged, destroyed things they prized. Control. That's the one thing the church has given us who have groped our way back. Association with people who have learned the same lessons, got the same perspective, and are now reaching out toward the same strength. And the strength is there, a strength that is not our own. A community of affirmation and acceptance, where everybody counts, from tall to small. A community of accountability, where everyone is challenged to be all they can be. And also way back then, in the middle of that night, they discovered a community everlasting. Now, I know to many modern so-called Enlightenment minds, this sounds incredulous. A physicist has a new book out in which he argues on the basis of scientific data for the possibility of the resurrection of the whole human race at some future time. And the reviewer for the New York Times book review section last Sunday simply didn't know what to do, doesn't know what to do with that book. Imagine that, a scientist talking about resurrection. But I tell you, unless we can hope that our deepest relationships stand up, even in the face of death itself, they will be inevitably tinged with a kind of melancholy and defeat. One man writes, "When I remember all the friends so linked together I've seen around me fall like leaves in wintry weather, I feel like one who treads alone some banquet hall, deserted, whose lights are fled, whose garlands dead, and all but he departed." And I can understand that if this is all there is. But what if an old faith is right? And the few brief years here are but a prelude to something greater. And the loves we love here do not end in death. What a different spirit the words of Sam Shoemaker near the end of his life. As I sit in the study on a beautiful, cool afternoon, I look back with many thanks. It's been a great run, and I wouldn't have missed it for anything. Much could and should have been better, and I have by no means done all that I should have done with what I've been given. But the overall experience of being alive has been a thrilling one. And somehow I believe that death is but a doorway to more of it. Clearer, cleaner, better. I believe that eternity will be an endless opportunity to consort with the great souls and the lesser ones who have entered into the freedom of the heavenly city. But again, I say it's been a great run. I'm thankful for it and for all the people who helped make it so, and especially those closest and dearest to me who wait on the other side. What if the community of acceptance and accountability that God offers us in the love of Christ is community forever? It means that our relationships here should take on a solemnity and a joy that they otherwise will not bear. Indeed, and you know, as we keep their memory rich and strong, those who've gone on ahead of us, there is a sense in which we know community even now that transcends their physical absence. There's a sense in which they are still with us. The hymn speaks of mystic, sweet communion with those whose rest has won. Their thoughts and their songs surround us still. I sometimes wonder who is most present to my life, the bodies who pass by on a given day, or the words and spirit of those friends whom I visit in memory and who speak to me still and again out of their wisdom and love. There is a community that does not end with death. One man has described it all this way, and I love his picture. I'm afraid you may not consider it an altogether substantial thing. It has to be seen in a certain way, under certain conditions. Some people never see it at all. You must understand this is no dead pile of stones and unmeaning timber, this community. It is a living thing. And when you enter it, you hear a sound as of a mighty poem. Listen long enough and you will learn that it is made up of the beating of human hearts, of the nameless music of men's souls. That is, if you have ears. If you have eyes, you will presently see it, a looming mystery of many shapes and shadows, the work of no ordinary builder. The pillars of it go up like the brawny trunks of heroes, the human flesh of men and women, the faces of little children laughing from every corner. The terrible spans and arches of it are the joined hands of comrades, and up in the heights and spaces there are inscribed the numberless musings of all the dreamers of this world. And yet it is still building and built upon, this community. Sometimes the work goes forward in deep darkness, sometimes in blinding light, now beneath the burdens of unutterable anguish, now to the tune of great laughter. And sometimes in the silence of the night time, one may hear the faint songs of comrades singing high up in the arches, comrades who have gone on before. The community of faith, the family of God, you and me, forever.